Hello and welcome to 360 Self Love. I am your host, Vilmaris Bosque. Today, we are going to be continuing our conversation on feminine embodiment and the masculinized version of femininity. This is part two of our previous episode, and I'm super excited to welcome back our guest, Sarah Shepherd. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hi, Vimala. So happy to be back and continue our conversation. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here. So, we covered a lot last time. We talked about so much. And for our listeners, if you didn't have a chance to listen to part one of this episode, I highly encourage you to. So, when you get a chance, go listen to that. But we covered so much about performance, um, how we step into our yin energy or how we embody more of our yin feminine energy, and one of the things that we talked about that I would love to go back to was structure and control and discipline. So, these very masculine traits that are important and that sometimes can become a little too strong, a little too overpowering in our system. How do we know when structure is supporting us versus when it's controlling us?
hmm Yeah. Yeah. The a great kind of recap on the masculine or the feminine, very, very briefly, is direction of gaze. So your masculine gaze, whether you're in a man's body or a woman's body, could be summarized as the perceiving the outside world, what's happening in the outside world. And the feminine gaze, really briefly, is a gaze inward. What's happening in the inward landscape? What's happening in my feeling body? What's happening in my intuitive and like inner deep knowing. And so one of the things that can happen when we built so much external structure that we're not listening to the inside is we lose track of our yeses and our nos from our inside. It becomes like it's all my yeses and my nos have to do with what commitments did I make? What was the plan? How do I stay in this relationship with the outside world that's incredibly linear, but it doesn't offer us the opportunity to listen in. And if you're whole system of energy and awareness is in the outer world, and this is like the common experience for many of us, then that looking towards the inner world can feel anxiety inducing, right? It can feel anxiety inducing, and there can be this inability to trust the body's yeses or nos. So that might
Mm,
mean not recognizing your hunger cues. It might be not able to move to crying because that experience
mhm,
of crying feels like it might overwhelm your system in some way. Um, it can feel like I need to go, 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 go. And if I rest or if I pause, the only thing that's here is anxiety because it's like my energy is just so far forward ahead of me. That's what the awareness of anxiety means. Your energy is outside and ahead of you, as opposed to your energy being inside and integrated with your intelligence. So you can just ask
mhm,
yourself that question. Is all of my awareness in the structure and the goal and the outer achievement, or am I able to land in this like deep feeling sense of myself? And if I allow myself to like sit into that, um, you'll notice where you're feeling nourished and where you're not
mhm.
feeling nourished. And that initially can be a little bit alarming, but it can also be this place of refinement. So, um, yeah, do you feel like that answers that question?
Yes, absolutely. So, what are some signs that structure is supporting us versus when it's not?
Yeah, these are great things to look for. So, do you feel a structure, like a good structure you'll be able to feel more spacious. You'll be able to feel more creative. You'll feel like a more trust towards yourself and what that impulse of yes and no is telling you. Because of the structure, you'll feel like you can be in consistency without having to force consistency.
Mm,
It'll start to arise naturally because you're in a space where you're more resourced. And ultimately, that makes you more adaptive to your environment. That
mhm,
means that you can be a little bit more agile in relationship with structure and with boundary. And so it's not a wall. It's allowing you to be in your body and listening outward and listening inward simultaneously. And the structure creates a space for that to happen.
Mhm.
It allows this like pacing to be more present with your body. The signs that structure is controlling you is you'll feel guilty if you deviate from it, or you'll feel like you can't be
Mhm.
spontaneous in the moment because everything's constantly like needing to be optimized in some way. And this is usually where we kind of can run into this relationship with illness, or symptoms sort of become a burden when they show up, and we don't want to listen to like, my body's run down, or I've got this like raging PMS or headaches that doesn't cohere with like my routine. So that means you can become loyal to the pain instead of like the reality of what your body's trying to show you. So if you find yourself panicking, if the routine changes or deviates in some way, then that's a good sign that the structure is controlling you and you're not including your body's needs within it. It's just that you've prioritized in some way the structure over your own sovereignty. And that shows up a lot in masculinization of the feminine. The masculinization is the structure, and then the feminine is not able to move within that because there's too much structure.
Sure, yes. And so there's a healthy masculine expression. How or what's the difference between that healthy masculine energy and over identifying with the masculine energy?
Yeah, this is like so great. And even for me to go back through this and like do a little self-audit on my own masculine, right? Because we all, as a woman, I have my own masculine. It's my external world and my agency, and I can over-identify with it. So things to look for. Healthy masculine acts from purpose. It acts from a deep, like, longing to bring something into the world from a space of leadership. Being over identified with the masculine means that I might feel like I need to act from fear or from proving myself. It's sort of this inadequacy in the guise or the shape of performance, but it's actually
Mm,
coming from this place which is like, well, I need you to confirm my masculine in order for me to experience it.
mm,
Healthy masculine will lead with presence, not big, grand, directives or orders. In expressions of like over identifying, it's like the nervous system is just constantly trying to control outcomes, and it doesn't really believe that it can be enough in its expression. Um, Healthy masculine creates safety. If we over identify with rigid masculine, we just end up creating rigidity, not safety. There is a big difference in this. Decisiveness without urgency is clear masculine energy. It can discern and it can choose, but it doesn't need to be compulsively productive. That compulsive production is again this over identification with masculine in an unhealthy way. Healthy masculine can rest. Being in a relationship with unhealthy masculine can feel like it's a guilt for resting. These can show up related to our mother and our father wound. They're good ones to kind of look for of like, how was your father in his relationship with the world? And then what part of me picked that up?
mm,
Healthy masculine understands boundaries and protects them, but they're fluid and they're flexible. Over identification with masculine puts up walls as boundaries and just says like, no, this is the hard and final, and it doesn't matter what else is here. It stops for like listening for the information. The listening for the information is actually the feminine expression, but
mm,
masculine in its healthy expression is in devotion to the feminine expression. Um, it doesn't use discipline to provide self-worth. It's it's comfortable with emotions. It doesn't like a healthy expression of masculine will observe a big wave of feminine and it'll appreciate it as its countermeasure as opposed to trying to control it as something that needs to be managed or suppressed. That's in self or in other.
mm,
Other indications of healthy masculine will allow there to be a mystery. It's like, I'm here for the mystery. I'm here to witness and observe feminine mystery, the unmeasurable. Whereas unhealthy masculine is like, I need to have certainty. I'm not taking another step until we absolutely know that we're gonna, get our return on investment or whatever it is. There's no place for magic in that space. And so feminine
mm,
really brings this like magical essence into life. And as a woman, if we've lost our magical essence, a really succinct and simple way of listening to that is we need to feel safe to come out of our head down into our heart, down into our womb space. And if that's not safe to come all the way down and in, or there's still portions of the journey that are a part of that, then we can't touch our essence. And
Hmm.
that's the numbness that shows up a lot. Like I feel like when I was re-listening to our podcast, one of the things was I feel like Vimala's and I should talk about the numbness that occurs. And one of the things I learned from the gene keys that I found was really helpful because I had been experiencing a lot of numbness, but I didn't know that I was experiencing numbness.
Hmm.
So if you can't touch your feminine essence and you're feeling flat and sort of like everything's dulled and muted in some way, or you're in that silent scream and you can't quite move into a trust of the intuition that's showing up in that place, it simply means that it hasn't been safe for you to in the past. And it might be now, but like that's your own growth work is like making it safe for yourself and then realizing what safe enough is. And truly, I don't want to minimize this because it can be one of these areas that women will come towards their essence and then they'll go the other way because they get triggered from their own, like, oh, I don't know what's in there. And then it might be shadows or it might be these big emotions that my mom wouldn't let me have or my dad wouldn't let me have. And so now I'm reliving that trauma of it being unsafe, not knowing how to come into my own feeling body. And, that's so much of the work that we do when we get to work with people is like, how do I create a safe container for you to find you, for you to unwind in you? And yeah,
Hmm.
we can go into more of kind of what that looks like. But yeah, I feel like knowing that numbness is a sensation and allowing ourselves a permission field to be like, I don't know what I'm feeling. I'm feeling numb.
Hmm.
I've been living
Yes.
in my head for so long. All I feel is blunted numbness in my body. And that's
Hmm.
partially freeze. And it's partially our job to bring those places that were unsafe to feel into safety. And then actually, if they're in safety, to go into the process, which may or may not be talking. A lot of the time
Hmm.
it's humming, growling, stomping, taking shapes with the body.
Hmm.
Communicating in a feminine way isn't like talk therapy. And it isn't like sharing circles.
Hmm.
A lot of the time it's dancing and moving and like, really embracing the impulse of sensation that moves without trying to make sense of it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I'm not sure that I personally have gotten much clarity on how and when I've been numb. I definitely know I have. I relate a lot more to the flight response that we're currently in, especially as a high performer. And I can I can describe that so clearly because it's become so familiar in my body, especially somatically. I recognize the signs very easily, and I have a lot of parts that show up this way. So, but I'm curious, since you're talking about numbness, can you, from your experience, because I know you just said that you didn't know you were there, but you eventually figured it out. How did you figure it out? How did you know you were numb? What were some of those signs in your body?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, it's okay to not know the answer to something when somebody asks you a question that's like an inward facing gaze question, right? So, how did I know there was numbness? I didn't have an answer. When people are like,
Hmm.
how are you feeling? And I'm like, I wasn't
Hmm.
feeling good and I wasn't feeling bad. I was just sort of like in between, sort of like a little bit, I guess the word is like copacetic, I'm
Hmm.
all right. I'm not thrilled. I'm not super elated. I'm not switched on and experiencing a lot of life force and pleasure, but I also am not feeling really sad or really, I used to have this expression which is like I don't really get angry because
Hmm.
for my own like childhood wounding, anger was something I really wanted to avoid because that was something that I felt like I got too much of and I got to see the overflow of what that felt like to be in a space of a lot of anger. And so I told myself I'm never gonna be angry. And anger is one of these many somatic intelligent teachers that is trying to show us where we need a boundary. And if
Hmm.
I made a commitment to myself, which was I'm never going to be angry, that also is I'm never going to have a boundary. And that's not
Hmm.
wise, right? So it led to this numbness around like, well, I guess I just have to experience what I'm experiencing. And I think this can be so confusing for women because they feel like femininity is just passive and I just
Mm-hmm.
need to be like the sweet one all the time. And it's really
Mm-hmm.
not. And I'm grateful that you brought up the nervous system in the expression of like the fight response or the flight response, and then the freeze and the fawn response. And we briefly touched on these last time, but it can be really helpful to tie in the nervous system and the yang and the yin expressions of the nervous system, like we covered in Taoism. So the flight response is kind of obvious, right? It's like, I want to run away. I need to run away from the situation. But the other thing that you named is it also can be this discomfort with the situation where it's like, oh, I'm going to run to this person who needs me to save them, right? This like
Mm-hmm.
some sort of situation that's playing out in front of me. This person needs me to jump in so that they don't have to feel the feelings that they're feeling when actually they're maybe fine with where their experience is, but I'm uncomfortable with the feelings that they're evoking in me. So I'll fly into saving them. This is also the expression of the overthinker or workaholic. You can just be like, if I'm ruminating, if I'm obsessing, if I'm in perfectionism, if I'm being a bit of an isolationist, oh, I'm in a flight response. Something's triggered my nervous system to run away from something that's greater than my capacity to understand and integrate right now. I can't remain fully within. I'm needing to move away. That's fine. It happens to all of it. It happens to me too. A lot of the time you can look for the flight response in your body. If we're sitting together having a conversation and I notice my toes want to dig in a little bit, or I'm squeezing my glutes or like clenching my jaw to stay there,
Mm-hmm.
that's like low
Mm-hmm.
grade flight response happening, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or similarly, like again, and this is the yang side. So flight and fight both fall under the yang expression. There's energy that wants to move towards either running away or at the person. And so angry outbursts, really bullish or explosive behavior. This is a yang expression of fight. Reactivity, am I in a posture of defense or am I in a posture of discernment? Very
Mm-hmm.
similar postures. One is gathering healthy masculine, more information, staying present. The other one just wants to win. Just like being honest with herself, like which one am I in?
Yes.
And like being able to be like, is that true? I maybe might win the argument right now, but I'll lose the friendship or the connection. And so
Mm-hmm.
then my yin shame will start to show up where I'm like, but that was important. Like that relationship is valuable to yin. But then over expressions of yin when we're not used to the territory, or nobody's ever taught us the territory of our nervous system. Um, a lot of women will fall more under the yin expression, which is where we see the freeze and the fawn. And like I really loved learning that if I have a fawn response and my energy is sort of collapsing to connect with you so that I can feel safe, that's all it is. I'm just leaning into your approval as a way for me to feel safe, as a way for
Mm-hmm.
my nervous system to feel safe. Now, what I might be doing in that is I might be abandoning my own needs, or I
Mm-hmm.
might be abandoning my own boundary because I just need to maintain connection at all costs. And we can see these attachment patterns show up in our relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Freeze looks exactly like you think. It's like it's shutting down. It's like I'm sleeping a lot. I'm feeling stuck. I can't make a decision. I just seem like everything doesn't seem like the right decision. That's an indication that
Mm-hmm.
your nervous system's in freeze.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Numbness is the sensation of freeze. It's not kind of obvious, right?
Yeah.
Numbness is the
Yeah.
sensation of freeze. But for us to come out of numbness and come out of freeze, we actually need a bit more fire. We need a bit more anger. And if we
Mm-hmm.
can't get to the anger, which this has happened to me, I know the whole landscape, I know what I need. I go into it and I'm like, I can't find the rally inside of me. For a woman in a woman's disposition, this works great for men too if they want to play with it. But a lot of the time, all we need to start doing is making the shapes and the sounds, not telling the story so much. Or it might be like, if I need to have more fire, because my tendency is to go into fawn or freeze, if I need to have more fire, what is the sound of fire?
Hmm.
what is the like the body movement of fire? And then I just start building that in my body, and you watch how quickly it starts to move. And I love learning this about women's bodies is that we're alchemists. We can
Yeah,
transform anything within us if we know our orientation, if we know where we are
yeah,
relative to it, and what is the language that the somatic intelligence is teaching us. Because remember,
yeah.
talk therapy is like mind related. Masculine therapy is mind and story and mindset related, but somatic and feminine connective therapeutic dynamics are bottom up. So they may or may not make sense to the mind. So that can become this place where we're like, oh, I can't. But if you know the nervous system and you're able to kind of look at like, oh, I go way too far this way or I go way too far this way, we're always looking for the sweet spot for that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thank you for all of this. So good. So much there. So I know we've had this conversation a lot of times, and it's so important for anyone listening that is new to the science of the nervous system to understand that it is perfectly normal to fluctuate between all these states. We're not trying to avoid being in flight, in fight. These are perfectly healthy nervous system responses. And what we have learned as well through somatics is that, or what we get to learn through somatics is that when we connect deeply with ourselves, there's an opportunity to come back to self. Not that self doesn't exist in these flight or fight responses, but what we don't want is to stay in these responses for too long. And so, for someone like myself who is a high performer and describe myself as a high performer for a really long time, I know that sometimes it can feel a little scary to soften our edges because we feel like we may be losing our edge. How would you guide or what would you say to the woman who's afraid that if she softens, she's going to lose her edge?
Yeah, I love this question. Uh, First of all, uh, know that it's okay to have that experience and that that is like an awareness to have of like, oh, I am noticing that I'm really in performance, or I'm noticing that I've been conditioned to be in performance and I didn't know there was another avenue. This is what's
Mhm,
worked for me. This is the tool that's gotten me what I needed. But now I'm numb, or I'm bitter or resentful, or I'm disconnected, and I can see that a part of me is like, I'm not feeling what I want to be feeling, but I don't want to lose my edge. And I think it has everything to do with you don't lose your performance edge by feeling more connected to your body. And I don't think that we covered this word neuroception or interoception is like another way
mhm,
of saying it. So you could look at you have all of these incredible capacities and performance, and being able to attune to your gut and your interoception is one that you don't want to miss out on because
mhm,
you're always in the performance side of expression, whether you're a man or a woman. Um, so I think this really common like misconception about the feminine is that like softening is somehow less effective, or that leaning back into self doesn't mean that you're leaning in either, right? That you can actually hold this place where you can include your neuroception, you can include your gut and your heart and your deep knowing, and then you can bring that into these capacities of discipline, of execution, of strategically thinking, of leadership, of resilience, of responsibility, well attuning to what's here. It makes you more intelligent to just to
mhm,
pause and to slow down. So you're still moving forward. You're still being an agent of your life, but instead of, somebody giving each woman's different, by the way. I just want to name this. Like some women have an intuition and you'll have to like listen for yourself which one is you. They know right away. They know right away what the answer is, and it's in the human design system it's like this splenic intuition. It's a it's like a deep knowing that moves through you. This is where we need to go. It's
mhm.
this.
Yeah.
And if you listen to that and you trust it, and you're a leader, you'll know as a woman, you become very familiar with that way of leading and listening. But not every woman has that expression. And the woman
Mhm,
that doesn't tends to doubt her intuition or if that's the right clarity that she's getting. And what I would say is that that woman, that expression of that woman just needs to be offering herself a little bit more time to integrate and listen in. So if somebody asks me a question and I know that I'm the latter and I need to keep leading, but make decisions, including myself, I might just say, thanks for that. Let me sit with it and I'll get back to you tomorrow. Right? I'm really interested in what we're building as a goal. I'm really leaning into this thing. I need 72 hours to really deeply listen to what's true for me, and I'm going to come back to
Mhm.
this situation like that. Because of patriarchy or because of some of the nature of productivity in the West, the idea of taking time to listen in is sometimes perceived as weakness. Like, what, you don't know? You can't just act on this right away. You're unprepared.
Mhm.
And so it can be this way we get bullied away from listening to our deep knowing. And then all of a sudden we stop trusting it because it's like, well, some women, they're able to work right, listen and move right away. But I need to listen to myself, and therefore I'm weaker in some way or something like that. So that's an important part, is like knowing how you interpret information and then being the one that's, this is my masculine saying, what I need is 24 hours.
Mhm.
Or I can just say, oh, thanks for that question. I'm not sure yet, but I know I have more to add to this. So let me sit with it. Like just variations. I often find when I work with women, we do know what we need, but sometimes people just haven't given us permission to say that sentence of, you can say, I'm going to come back to this. I need a little bit of time to sit with it. Nobody's taught me the
Mhm.
sentence before. Wow, this is really important to me, Vilmalez. I'd like to take some time to give you a really great answer instead of,
Mhm.
right, just like giving you an answer. So, um, I feel like that's a really important part of that question. I also feel like, this edge side is it's having an embodiment presence is an edge. That woman that fully holds her spaciousness and centeredness and walks into the room, walks into any environment with that, she's got an edge. It just
Mhm.
doesn't look like what we recognize in other people. And that can show up because sometimes, like, the masculine expression in the world is really easy to measure, but the feminine is just sort of there. We don't really know what it is. It's mystical
Mhm.
and it's difficult to measure. And therefore, it doesn't get expressed or like get as much compliments as it tends to. And so people will tend to say, like, of a deeply embodied woman, they'll tend to say things like, I don't know what it is about her. I feel really good around her. I don't know what it is
Mhm.
about her, but like I'm really like drawn to her. There's like a natural
Mhm.
magnetism to a woman that's not trying to perform and is just holding that. So that
Mhm.
edge becomes, I don't need to chase things. My edge is that things come to me and everything that's right for me comes to me because my vibration is so legible to other people that they feel me and they're like, oh, I got to talk to Sarah. Oh, I got to talk to Bill Meliz. She's going to help me solve this thing. We're going to collaborate on this, whatever it is, because there's a feminine resonance. And when you've got neuroception, when you've got that like deep knowing body within you, you're reading on that plane. And other people might not be reading on that plane. And the people that are not reading on that plane, they might get nervous about that.
Mhm.
So the feminine edge is like, it's actually a funny sort of space to really start like naming and claiming. Where do you see it already in the world where you're like, damn, girl, that is so
Uh-huh.
beautiful to watch? Where do you
Yeah,
see expressions where you're recognizing other women that are embodying that? And like, watch what kind of edge they have. Watch how powerful it is. It just doesn't look like the masculine expression. Yeah.
for sure. For sure. Thank you. I can very much relate to that and the struggle of letting go the parts of myself that felt like what was giving me form or what I thought were what defined me. And as I began to embody the feminine part of me more deeply, as I began to honor that more, it has been quite a battle. And I know we've had the conversation in this past week because my controller part has been online. And
Yeah.
so this is a very masculine part for me. And it's been quite the journey with this part of me that at some point in my life gave me form, gave me a container. It made me feel safe. I very much needed. in my teens, in my early 20s. And as we talked about in our last part of this episode, there is a version of the discipline that is very rigid. And so this part crosses that line. And so this past week for me, it's very interesting because while we are aware of these parts and these versions of ourselves, these can still continue to come up so that we have the opportunity to go deeper into them, to work them even more, to find, to dive deeper into layers of the fears. And that's what I have been doing a lot the past week. And I love that you mentioned how the feminine doesn't look like the masculine, because what I've reflected on a lot this past week was a lot of my frustration. A lot of the frustrations of this part has been like, but we have to follow this schedule and it has to look like this and it has to, be so perfectly structured. And it's like happens uh it has to happen a certain way. We work from Monday through Friday and take off the weekends or whatever this part thinks is the proper structure. But as we know, the feminine body, we are cyclical beings. So when we are forcing ourselves to have to hold ourselves in a different way that isn't congruent with the energy or the flow of that yin energy, it's just we're clashing constantly with that. And it's felt like really, it's become really clear for me in this past week how this part tries to avoid being in the feminine, not knowing it just because it's so fixated on things have to look a certain way. And so that like almost forceful structure, it is the hardest thing for me right now. It has been the hardest, one of the hardest parts of my growth as a leader as well, because like you said, we don't create the same way that other leaders who maybe embody more their masculine create. It looks different. And trusting that when you have been taught that it has to be a certain way, wow, like that's really where the growth is. And that's where it happens, in that surrender and that trust. Yeah, still working with it though. For me, it's not necessarily something that I can say I've mastered, but I have, yeah, I have gotten a lot more clarity, and it's a beautiful journey. So
Yeah, and I love the way you're naming that is like it's a journey. This is a journey that I have taught many women the path, and as a result of that, I get like called into the responsibility of role modeling it. And I love that that's a responsibility that I have. I wonder sometimes if I would be so loyal to it for my own benefit if I didn't have other women to be accountable of
yeah.
around this thing. And one of the things that really helped me is like looking at that it's a maturation process. It's a process. We don't just have this like download. I mean, you can. Some people can have an epiphany where they're like, "Oh, I completely trust in the world. I can see the beauty of all of it. I never need to tr control another thing again." But like that is actually just like it's so freaking rare. And if we have
Mhm.
this feeling like my controller part, I love that you're using the language of the parts work. This controller part doesn't trust, then all that is my feminine is in an expression of its immaturity because it doesn't have access to trust. Now, I love to look at that as like, oh, that's a younger part, not like I'm bad because I'm having an immature reaction to that and I'm a 47-year-old woman and how dare I have an immature reaction to that? But instead, I can look at that part and go, ooh, I am touching on some younger parts that
Mhm.
really wanted to experience safety and are now longing to experience safety because that's really all control is, right? I'm
Mhm.
longing to experience safety. And if,
Mhm.
again, we can orient to like, oh, I want to have safety right now and I don't feel like I have safety, then that's here's me and here's my relationship with trust. And I'm just not in alignment with the trust right now. So then what do I need to do to address the safety piece? We
Mhm.
don't like this is where bypassing shows up for a lot of people where they're just like, oh, I just trust and surrender. And they like don't actually trust and surrender. And they're subversively in these like parts of controlling and manipulation. And maybe what I'll do is like I'll actually name some of those parts of like I call it the princess feminine versus like the sovereign feminine. And I'm just going to read off of my notes and like allow these to be cringy for you if you feel like, oh, yeah, sometimes I'm in the princess feminine or the sovereign mature feminine looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So another part of my work is like kink and eros, and a lot of kink and eros, the thing that it reveals is like the somatic sensations around our value and sensuality and taking up space in sensuality. So it's like a really beautiful place to have conversations about where we want to be in control and where we're actually like super exhausted and we don't want to be in control and we'd like to change that pattern. But you got to look at the arc here. So, Princess Feminine, you can track for yourself. Let me know what stands out. Is a developmental stage. And in its shadow expression, so in its unconscious patterning, we'll try to manipulate. It'll lean on passivity or like bypassing. It'll be testing of masculine. It'll sort of constantly be like testing, like, do you value me? Do I matter? It can have like an over attachment or an over kind of bonding of self to another person's value or another person's like expression of what's valuable. But in the positive states of our feminine, in our youthfulness, it's like playfulness and magnetic and emotionally expressive and desire driven. So if you think of a young girl in her, like, I want to dance, look at me, like that expression, we
Yes.
all have that little girl inside of us all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Said to that little girl, you can't dance, you can't take up big space, then we're like, mm. And what will happen is these like immature expressions or these shadow expressions. So the characteristics can look like constantly seeking attention and approval, fantasizing about being taken. Like, I don't need to control, I don't need to claim my own sexuality. Somebody else needs to be responsible for it. She'll have a tendency, or the feminine expression will have a tendency to externalize power. Outer world has power. I don't have any power. That's not true. It's just like an expression of princess feminine coming into a more mature relationship with it. It's very reactive to rejection, incredibly
Mm-hmm.
reactive to rejection. So rejection is like a great teacher to listen for. Am I feeling like I need to control the outer world because I don't want to feel the sensation of rejection? And so my embodiment is jumping into controlling the outer world because I don't want to feel how vulnerable it feels in this moment where people said no to me when I brought my heart's offering to them in that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
The erotic expression of a woman in this is very conditional. Like, I'll only soften, I'll only feel receptivity if you make me feel safe or if the perfect situation is there. But the core needs are really beautiful. Like, it's like it wants to be desired and chosen. This is a craving for validation and safety that we maybe didn't get as a little girl, and now we're still needing to collect those parts of our developmental process. Um, the core need is like to learn how to be in relationship with boundaries and that it doesn't need to be performative in order to experience herself. So like most women would say in some variation or another, that's where they feel like they land. And even if you start to identify more with sovereign feminine, there'll be times where immature princess feminine still comes to the party, right? She's a part. She's allowed to be
Mm-hmm.
there. But do you want to act from that space, or do you know that there's this whole other sovereign feminine? Now, sovereign feminine in her shadow can be hyper independent if it's unbalanced. It can
Mm.
be aloofness, like it doesn't matter. I can make all my choices. Nobody needs to be involved in my choices. I'll do everything on my own. It's fine. I'll do everything on my own,
That's
right?
okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it's this place where she doesn't want to co-create unless everything meets her needs. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like it's good to be aware of that. The power that she has is that she doesn't lose sovereignty in order to be in a dynamic with somebody else. So I'm going to define sovereignty really quickly. Like this is just the fastest way that I find to ask myself, am I in my sovereignty? So, sovereignty is I don't need anyone or anything outside of me to be different for me to access my okayness. Not perfect, not happy, not like any other emotion, just okayness. Am I good
Mm-hmm.
enough in myself in this moment, regardless of what the outer world is doing? So that's sovereignty. And if you're acting from the sovereign expression, your turn on in your life are your responsibility, not somebody else's. You're grounded in your nervous system. And when you're not grounded in your nervous system, you're like, whoa. I got to take care of my regulation. That's my
Hmm.
responsibility. I'm not making it your responsibility. That's me. That's
Hmm.
all on me. Because of that, she has a trust in life because she knows that her system, should things go towards a boundary, are going to be like, wait, and she'll catch it and she'll speak to it. Or even more often, what's really powerful of a sovereign woman in this expression, she'll communicate it through her body language. She'll just change her shape a little bit. And because she's so flicking magnetic, everybody is like paying attention to that. And as soon as she changes her disposition or demeanor a little bit, people also change their disposition and demeanor. And I love for women to understand this. You have so much power in your body to communicate your needs without asking for them to be met in the traditional ways that you've been taught that you have to. There's so many more ways for women to influence a room or a space from being in her sovereign expression and knowing what her desires and needs are. Um, she will choose to surrender and be conscious about, I'm going to move towards trust and surrender and like let this situation unfold as a result of, I know I can influence it with my vibration. I don't need
Hmm.
to steer it. I can actually influence the quantum field of the universe with my feminine intelligence fully in my body. Um, this growth part that comes with this journey is learning nuance. So if you're feeling like it's like, I need control or I need other people to be in control, another way of looking at that is like you're in duality. It's all black or it's all white. And that's just a younger part of us.
Hmm.
So a feminine expression can see there's some good things here and there's some bad things here. And I can hold both of them in my capacity and my awareness. I don't need, if we're triggered and we go into duality, just like notice, oh, I'm triggered. I jump to conclusions there. I'm in, it's all good or it's all bad. As a mature feminine, I know there's so many nuances and colors and like little like aspects of information that are also here. And so it's allowing myself to like soften into that. So I like to just like pulse check myself on like, how's my nervous system?
Hmm.
Good way to check is like, am I curious? Am I
Yeah.
fully in? Am I curious? And can I see nuance? Can I see that I'm simultaneously offended, but I'm like maybe also getting something out of like the enriching experience of this challenge or the complexity of what's happening right now. And that openness means that you're not relying on external validation. You're still staying in your discernment without going into like fantasy. Um, Power is something that's given a lot from women that are in this place because they have so much of it. They actually want to give it to men and other women. They want to ennoble other people with how much feminine reserve that they have. So you'll find they're incredibly generous, but they will never overgive. They'll
Hmm.
stop for that part because the moment you're overgiving, you're actually in an immature feminine expression. So it's generous to the point where then you're like, no, I'm not giving more than that. And I don't need to give more than that.
Hmm.
So it's like giving for the overflow of bringing enrichment in versus transactionally giving it so that you can get something from it. It's a very different vibration to play
Hmm.
with in consciousness. And then another thing to look for is like, I'm not collapsing when I meet an edge or I'm not
Hmm.
avoiding an edge. I'm not just going like, fine, it doesn't matter. I'm really like able to stay fully open, interested, uh, pacing myself based on what my needs are, right? Like we were talking about before, like I don't know what the answer is right now, but it's really important to me. I will get back to you with it. Like elements like that where we can listen to that cyclic nature. We were talking about this with surfing. I feel like the ocean is such an incredible expression of feminine intelligence, you know? And as a
Hmm.
surfer, like if the waves aren't there, the waves aren't there. You just wait until they show
Hmm.
up. You can't be like, ocean, I put it in order. I'm here to surf. But that's
Yeah.
actually like why we love sports like that because we
Yeah.
know that we have to listen deeply and be in surrender. And if we listen deeply with our body, what happens is the waves do come and you know how to
Hmm.
read them and you know how to surf them and you know that that's actually what you're there for is to like
Yeah.
surf that big wave of whatever it is, inspiration, passion, experience of like aliveness. That's feminine, intuitive like aliveness coming through in our own
Yeah.
experience. And we want to surf that. We want to be with that. That's what leads to
Yeah.
this incredible experience of fulfillment.
Yes. And a reminder for our listeners that it's a process. This place of sovereignty it's an embodied, a fully embodied feminine. And it takes time to get there. Sarah and myself are still working on that. We're still constantly going back and meeting deeper parts of ourselves. And that's what this like ties back to the conversation of the nervous system. When we go through these cycles of what I call the cycles of growth, when we come back to having to meet these parts over and over and over again, it's very different from repeating a cycle that is keeping us stuck versus a cycle that takes us deeper into ourselves and gives us the opportunity to work these parts at a deeper level. And when we are working these parts at a deeper level, we are going to go through that, through those different nervous system states. Some parts may live in a specific state a little longer, but eventually we're naturally going to go through all those different states and cycle back again. This is perfectly normal. It happens. And I've been paying attention to my cycle because I'm like, ooh, during this phase of my cycle, I am going more into this specific nervous system state. And it's just so beautiful to observe how it just all ties back to nature. We are nature, our cycles are nature. And so it's just a constant reminder to be okay with the process of the cycles, this place of like, you figure it all out and you kind of just stay there in this like bliss state. And yes, maybe there are some humans that actually achieve that. But we are humans and we have a nervous system and we are responding to that constantly. And life is going to challenge us and take us into those different phases so that we can get to work deeper with those parts.
Can we talk about the cycle? Because I don't think we've
Yeah.
covered it.
No.
And
Yeah.
like, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that it really wasn't until I was in my 40s that I started to deeply understand the feminine languages of the phases of the cycle. And maybe I read material about it. Maybe a woman taught me before. I can't say I really got it until more
Mhm.
recently in my life. And that's because I started to recognize like there's not one woman in here. There's four.
Yes.
At least
Yeah.
four, you know?
Plus,
And if
plus the parts, plus the
yeah,
parts,
that's all the parts. There's a
plus the
party
child
going on
parts.
in here. Yeah. And if you can, so here's like this book changed everything for me. It really brought it home. And that is it's called Wild Power. I can't remember. It's two
Okay.
women that are authors. I'm sorry, their names are escaping me right now, but I can share it with you and we can link it because it really gave me a language for PMS and the luteal phase that I had
Hmm.
been judging as like bitchiness or criticalness or sort of like this part of me that I was like, well, gosh, there's this fire that comes out, and that's my quick response. I
Hmm.
drop a
Hmm.
piece of paper or my car keys, and I'm like livid. It's nobody else's response. Like I'm not responding to another person that's offended me. I'm just offended in general. I couldn't figure out what it was, that fire that comes up in us, right? And I feel like it's so beautiful. There's all of this science devoted to women's cycles now, which there wasn't for a long time. But the way that they describe it in this book is the luteal phase is a lot like the latter part of a whole woman's life journey, where she's in that crone and that it's called maga, that very embodied, mature, sovereign feminine. And she sees boundary and where there needs to be boundary in order to protect the next phase that's coming. So another thing to understand about us is our intelligence is actually tracking for what's next all the time. So sometimes what comes up in our feminine intelligence seems like a mixed message because we're like, what? Like, I'm like on this day of my cycle, or if this is my plan, and I don't
Hmm.
even know where I am in my cycle. Please, if you don't know your cycle, please, please, please start studying your cycle and like learning
Hmm.
where you're at. You will start to realize you have way more intuition, you have way more
Hmm.
understanding of yourself than you realized. You just were taught not to listen. Remember, men have a 24-hour cycle in their hormones.
Hmm.
We have a 28-day cycle in our hormones. So if
Hmm.
we're trying to compare our 28-day cycle to a masculine expression of 24 hours, they get to be consistent. They get to have a high bump of testosterone in the morning, go, 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 go. It runs out towards the end of the day. They go to sleep, they start all over, they do it again. For us, we have these two waves, these two really big waves. If you know your luteal phase and you're an entrepreneur, This is a great time to look at like what bills am I paying that I don't need to be paying anymore? What commitments do I have that I don't want to keep having next month? Where did I get overzealous or over inspired in my ovulation phase and make commitments that didn't come into
I've been
fruition?
there.
And where do I don't into the next month? Or do I want to say like that was an unreasonable, that was a muse or immature part of
Yeah.
me, the princess part of me was like, yes, I want to do everything. I'm so inspired. And then
Yes.
the mature like mother MAGA crone phase comes in and she's like, girl, stop throwing your life force all over the place. Stop throwing it in all of these places just to please
Yeah.
everybody. Right? Because when our estrogen's high, we're like, I love everybody. I love everything. Let me show up for
Yeah.
you forever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
get into this luteal phase, and it's designed for us to go, where did I overcommit and where do I not want to apply that moving forward, so that as I can go into my bleed phase, I can actually just take this sacred time to be with the intelligence of my intuition.
Hmm.
The learning that my intuition was the most fluid and powerful during the bleed part of
Hmm.
my cycle made
Yes.
it so much easier for me to see where I was getting intuition in the other parts of my cycle. But I just thought it was connected to this like overwhelming feeling that I didn't want to feel, or I just thought it was connected to this like old memory that I had, and I couldn't really see how they correlated. And then it just like slowing down and really prioritizing. I've got a couple of days where I don't book myself. I might work,
Hmm.
I might
Hmm.
not. It depends on what my body wants. And starting to get into that way of looking at like life isn't about what I planned to do. It's about what do I deeply know is here. And then from that space, test it out into the world, get some
Hmm.
feedback, bring it back into self. What's true for me now? I'm not entirely okay. I'm getting more information. This is what's coming up. Bring it into the world, test it out, get some feedback. It may or may
Hmm.
not be wrong, but then you bring it back into self. So it's kind of like I love the word attunement for this reason, and it's a big word in somatic work, is
Hmm.
like, can we attune to our instrument?
Hmm.
When we're attuning to our instrument, then we can also attune to another person's instrument. We can also observe and like deeply listen to another person's tone and vessel. How are they presenting themselves?
Hmm.
It's less to do with the mind. It's more in this like impulse or this like sensations that I receive in my body. The more we listen to our cyclical nature and start moving in that and then include
Hmm.
ourselves in that, the more power we have. We don't waste so much energy on things.
Hmm.
If you're
Hmm.
not wasting energy, I assure you, you will be less bitter.
Yeah.
You'll be less resentful. You'll experience
Hmm.
like when a scream isn't there, it's not a silent scream anymore. It's like a
Yeah.
real scream that moves, and behind that scream is so much valuable healing life force. And
Hmm.
sometimes that means like big grieving. Sometimes that means like really big experiences that your masculine self doesn't think you can handle, but your feminine self can. And it
Hmm.
just needs to move. And as we know, like then you watch like the intuitive ideas drop in, like the containers that you want to build drop in, like the next layer of your business is like, it's this girl. And you're like, ah, I got it now.
Hmm. Hmm.
We've
Yes.
moved efficiently.
Yes. Tuning into my cycle and learning about my cycle has been such a gift. It has permission me to embrace these different personalities that come up because when I was young, before I learned about my cycle, which I actually did in my early 30s, I used to guilt myself so much because I felt XYZ and I had these high expectations. Talk about the controller. But once I learned about my cycle, it just gave me so much it gave me so much information and it taught me to be gentler and to really embrace this different li- powers that we have through our cycle. There's when we're ovulating, we're better at communicating. When we're in our luteal phase, our right, I believe it's our luteal or maybe the menstrual, but I know there's a time of your cycle when your right and left hemispheres meet. And maybe that's where you're talking about, right? When we are so much more connected with our intuition. So like that's when we're like so perfectly in this like masculine and feminine energy, like that perfect balance of the two, and have so much clarity. And so and also, what I've learned is through somatics is you were talking about interoception before. And interestingly, this was something that when I first started doing somatics, I was so good and with Pilates and with fitness been so good at developing my proprioceptive skills so that for our listeners who may not know what this is your ability to sense where your body is in space in relation to your environment. So I teach this a lot in my workouts. Again, I have great proprioceptive skills. I can probably hands down our members that we've met that have great proprioceptive skills because of how I cue to understand where their bodies are in space. And when I first started doing somatics, it was very hard for me, even while having those proprioceptive skills. It was very hard to go inward to my interoceptive skills were not yet developed. And I remember just sitting there in these sessions and being asked, what are you feeling? And I feel like an inch on my neck. Like that's what I felt. I just felt my external body,
Yeah.
even though my internal body was speaking constantly, I didn't know how to connect with it. So I wanted to go back to that because I think that it ties a little bit, I think, and maybe that is where there was a part of me that was numb and I didn't wasn't familiar um my intuition and um with uh with those internal sensations that, as we know, there's so much happening and we're from our thoughts to our sensations in our gut to just other feelings that we may have in our bodies that are our intuition speaking. And developing these skills are going to help us discern between thoughts, emotions, your intuition, which are all different. And that is such a skill that takes time. So there's a process that I just want to encourage our listeners to allow to happen here. And I know I've said this several times, but there is a process and it begins with that practice of going inward, which is, I think it's so much of what our conversation has been, which is that connection with the feminine. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to touch upon that very quickly.
Because I think that, numbness, this is like a deeper nuance in numbness, and that is like numbness is an adaptive strategy. So it was like I needed to make myself go numb in this situation because no other choice was available to me. So if you're feeling numbness or you're not sure what your intuitive like deep listening is, or you don't have proprioception, um, what that means is that your body is needed to quiet parts of you in the internal feminine experience because it wasn't safe for them to be there. And maybe it is safe for them to be here now, but they've been quieted
Mhm.
out of
Yeah.
necessity for the past.
Yes.
So that like movement of bringing them back online starts with, like you say, like I maybe know where my body is in space, but many of us don't.
Mhm.
And if you are really clumsy, if you find yourself like banging your body or like falling on things often, or, having this kind of relationship with like you don't really know how to reach your arm out and to grasp onto something, you're dropping things.
Mhm.
These are parts of the nervous system saying like we don't go, we've been offline, but they
Mhm.
can be brought back online
Mhm.
and they can be um brought out of freeze or into stasis. But just to have so much compassion, we ended the last one with like, what do women need to know about this journey? And it's like you need to be the one who's tender with yourself when
Mhm.
nobody's been tender with you around a certain part. And now you're learning the skill to be tender with yourself of like, oh, there's some deep hurt in here and there's some deep fear in here because a lot of the time we were gaslit. So we had a feeling and somebody said, no, 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 you're not feeling that. Don't cry. It's okay. You're okay. Maybe as a little girl, this is like a quintessential example of one of the things that we don't mean to do as parents, but we sometimes do
Mhm.
for a very interesting reason. But, a kid falls down, a child falls down, they're having a big physical nervous system activation. That's all it is. They're not
Mhm. Mhm.
thinking about somebody else's like needs or if they're making too much noise in a grocery store. It's a physical activation of energy that's supposed to move. But then socially, a mother or a father says, that's not what you're feeling. And then what happens is we start to go, oh, I'm not feeling sad, or oh, I'm not feeling pain, or oh, and like that happened in slivers. It happened
Mhm.
gradually over
Mhm.
probably several decades. And now
Mhm.
you're finding yourself wherever you are on your numbness journey. And usually it's like that was so unjust. Like these kind of anger parts of us start to come out because it's true. They do need to be processed and seen now. And that's the part that can be so scary is that turning towards is like, oh my gosh, there's
Mm-hmm.
some really big feelings in here that don't make sense to my mature adult brain because they're connected to my toddler experience or they're connected
Mm-hmm.
to my 7-year-old. I got abandoned on the playground and my best friend went with another girl and now I'm like so meeting that grief again and it doesn't make any sense because I'm in a boardroom meeting instead,
Yes.
like things like that where it's
Oh.
like yeah, somatic work is so illogical because it's relational, right brain, body side. And then as we start to come out of numbness, the waves of feeling that come up are illogical by their nature. So just to bring that like it is a process. It is meeting these big parts. These big parts are just us in other
Mm-hmm.
like areas of our life where we got wounded in some way. And I have loved this part of working with people in this phase of my life where the wound isn't something to fix. It's actually
Mm-hmm.
something that has intelligence that just needs to be loved, you know? So no matter what it is, it doesn't need to be fixed. It just needs to be like, wow, I've got some big feelings that need to move right now. And that's my
Mm-hmm.
responsibility to work with them. And the more I work with them, the more my landscape of my inner world becomes lucid. It becomes
Mm-hmm.
easier to read. And like I teach people about awakening a lot of the time, or this like spiritual awakening thing that can happen to us. And what I would argue it is it's actually just coming out of numbness and into like the fullness of our whole human capacities.
Mm-hmm.
We have been conditioned to be numb. This
Mm-hmm.
society at large has put us into this place where we needed to cohere and be homogenized. And that is no longer true. We're in a time where humanity gets to be more sovereign. But
Mm-hmm.
the encouragement is as you come into your sovereignty and your somatic awakening starts to happen, so does all of the parts that need to be
Mm-hmm.
loved. So does
Mm-hmm.
all of the parts of you that need to be met in a new way. And that journey, maybe you need a facilitator, but ultimately you do need to be the one that's like tender with yourself. And that's
Mm-hmm.
when I usually need a facilitator to work with me is like, oh, I found this one part or I found this like experience. I just can't quite move through it, or I just can't
Mm-hmm.
quite make sense of it, or it just keeps showing up in this pattern around one sort of area. Those are the times to get a somatic facilitator or somebody like bigger than you to hold space for you to unwind in it. And it isn't a
Mm-hmm.
healing process. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
fixing process. It's actually just
Mm-hmm.
a moving it process. And
Yeah.
there's something else there. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
like it's numbness starts to flow and then flow starts to happen and then you'll see there's more of you there.
Yeah, yeah. I know we have this conversation, have had this conversation before where we as guys know that not one human being is meant that we are guiding is meant to be with us for too long of a period of time. We're here to guide that initial process, to help people create the foundation for their healing. But ultimately, we do get to a place where we're the ones that we develop that ability. Like, and I think that that's perhaps what you're saying, where you're saying that sovereignty to be able to hold that space for ourselves. We learn the skills. But at first, as we are coming into this work, when we are not familiar with it, or perhaps we don't feel safe, or we just need some sort of guidance and structure, because it does require structure as well, or it does have some sort of structure within it. It does, it does look like allowing yourself to trust into someone else, but eventually the work is just happening constantly within us. And so, yeah, I know we've had that conversation, and that's worth mentioning because for the person that may be contemplating doing somatics and isn't sure how the process goes, you're not supposed to be with your facilitator for too long.
Mhm.
We're talking about 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could be a year,
Yeah.
and longer if you want, but ultimately you do develop the skills to be able to hold that space for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And in finding somebody, like I love the word mentorship for this reason, because I feel like a lot of the time what was lost in the human tribe was that we had elders that were role modeling the way that we can be healthy and now we've got this interesting cultural capitalism role modeling that's happening. And so some
Mm,
parts of the tribal role modeling have been lost. But I think that one of the sweetest permission fields that I've ever given myself is like, as a facilitator, I only need to role model where I've gotten to. I don't need to impress you
Mhm.
with where I'm not. And I don't need to go and work with clients that are like way advanced from where I am or way, distant from the place that I've made it to. We just want to find
Mhm.
people that are looking for the same healing journey around the same level of competency that we're at. And as a facilitator, ultimately, what I want you to do is I want to offer a little bit of enrichment and then I want you to go test it for yourself. So, like you were saying, like you don't need to stay with a facilitator or a leader for a long period of time. That can become a codependent pattern. To
Mhm.
break that,
Mhm.
that thing that you had with your mom or that you had with your dad, where you're like, I don't
Mhm.
want to make decisions that include my body. I just want you to make
Mhm.
them for me. It can
Yeah,
show up leaders and facilitators
sure.
where it's like, Bill Liz, you tell me how to live in my body. And if you tell me how to live in my body, then I'll know how to do it. No, that is not
Yeah.
true. You
No,
know?
yeah. Yeah.
It's all about like, how do I find out for myself what that is? And then how do I, again, nuance and tone? How do I carry this with this like nuance and tone in life, which is a little bit of like listening in and it's a sweet space as a facilitator too, to know that um, it's a bit of a breath. You work with somebody, they influence you, they, show you some new skills, and then you go and apply them. And you go,
Mhm.
the tide goes out and you go experience them and you get some more, experiential wisdom. Experiential wisdom is yin, going, what did I learn from that? What am I embodying now? This
Mhm.
is a super, super important nuance in this um, genre. You can know all of the somatic language. You can know all of the nervous system language. You can sound like you got all of this stuff together. But if you're not embodying it in those
Mhm.
moments where the challenge comes up, then you only have it mentally in your head. The capacity to contain yourself and to know where your energy is in your being is the embodiment of it. And that's
Mhm.
really the test. And it's quieter. It just shows
Mhm.
up with less drama in your life. It just shows up with like a being able to feel the pulse of trust in yourself. Those are indications of embodiment. And so being really like responsible of like, am I just talking the talk? Right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
am I able to really receive and harvest the container that I did with this person that I now am able to apply in my business, or I'm now able to apply in my family, or, however you want to bring it to the world. The embodiment part is really where the rubber hits the road. It's not in the perfect language of nervous system.
Absolutely. And yeah, and that again takes a little bit of time, but once we get there, it's like once you know what that feels like, oof, you don't forget it. It's such a
Yeah,
beautiful, incredible feeling.
and tracking for like, I'm out of it. That counts. Like that's success to be like, oh, I'm not
Yeah,
in it right now. I'm
sure.
gonna work on getting into it because like I know all of this stuff and I know what it feels like to be so triggered and
Hmm.
needing to do my, personal like
Yeah.
resourcing is a great way of looking at it. Like, is your container overflowing? That's
Yeah.
okay if it is. You can
Yes.
see that it is. What do you need to do to widen your container now so that it can
Yes.
hold this situation? It can hold
Hmm.
this face challenge. It can hold this often dissolving of our identity, right? Like
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
what it comes
Hmm.
down to is like when a part of our identity starts to dissolve and we're going into a panic, if we're circling around the same pattern, we just don't have a big enough container to go, okay, yeah, this is a part of my
Hmm.
integration journey. So like things like that are good things to look for in this like embodiment part.
Yeah, yeah. It's the coming back to self is really what the journey is about. Can you come back to yourself? Can you come back to grounding and recentering and
Yeah.
your true self?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and and yes, the parts get to be there if they're showing up, they get to be there. And they don't take over any longer. They're just there. They get to be in the process with you, and you can hold a duality or multiple parts at the same time while still being embodied in your true self. So, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I
love
like
this.
to look at that as like the parts get to play out their drama. And I'm not a bad woman for having my drama in my parts, but if I think I'm that part and I start acting from that part, I might be
Hmm.
getting hijacked by my own, material.
Hmm.
But if I have a
Hmm.
container, it can feel, oh yeah, I'm triggered. It can be like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, this,
yeah.
like this sort of thing. But I've still got myself within that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then also sometimes like just to have like honestly you guys like this like tenderness and like a good sense of humor. You need to have tenderness and a
Yeah.
good sense of
Yeah.
humor. Like sometimes I'm like, I got it, I got it, I got it. And like one tiny little thing happens and I'm like, I don't got it, I don't got
Uh-huh.
it. Like, it's
Uh-huh.
okay.
Uh-huh.
And to have friends that are like, wow, you really kind of shit the bed on someone. You're like, yep, had a moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay.
I've
I'm
had them.
allowed, right? I'm allowed in my new expression to be fallible and to try again anyway, to go and do something and like fall in the hole and get out and be like, hey, folks, don't fall in that hole. I just fell in it. I don't need to feel so much shame around it because I'm like constantly my
Yeah.
performative feminine. I'm like, no, hey, by the way, here's the thing I did.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
recommend it, but it's over here. And like then we
Yeah.
can connect over our challenges and we become wiser as a result of that. And
Mhm.
so that's
Mhm.
the world I long to have women playing in now is this place of like, if we're not playing in the masculine realm and we
Mm.
start playing in the feminine realm, isn't that going to be really fun for all of us to be playful
Mhm.
in this way? That sounds great to me, to be deeply embodied, to be centrally oriented, to be pleasure prioritizing, to be
Mhm.
able to experience like life as this beautiful, joyful play where I've got so much resource that in every moment I'm like, oh yeah, challenge, let's lean in. Like,
Mhm.
how are we going to do this
Mhm.
together in some way? So yeah, that's
For sure.
the world I want to
To
live
be
in.
and to be able to say, fuck the calendar this week, fuck the things on the to-do list. My feminine is needing to express herself in a certain way, and I'm just going to allow that to happen too. Yeah, that's hard. It's a process, but it's just feels so good when you do eventually get there.
Yep. Yep. It
Uh
is a rebuilding. Yeah. It's a rebuilding
yeah.
of like what used to work in my system. Do I want to keep going in that direction or do I want to build a new system? And I just wish that more people knew you can build a new system. That's all you, not somebody else's
Mhm.
system, all your like greatest expression.
Absolutely. So now that we're come back to this conversation of the masculine and feminine, so I'm curious, how can someone tell whether the way they naturally express themselves, whether that be a little bit more masculine or feminine or androgynous, is truly who they are versus something they've adapted over time?
Oh gosh. Um, Signs that you're living in adaptation, right? Signs that we've got like an adaptive strategy that's at the helm as opposed to our heart and our womb space at the helm. Does it feel like there's only effort there? Or is there like
Mm-hmm.
a well of inspiration that's like leading you? That's an adaptation. If everything feels like effort, then you've been in an adaptation, a masculine adaptation for a really long time. Right away, if you're noticing rest creates anxiety that you can't seem to move away from or move with in some way. So anxiety being this like I'm in the external versus like, or I'm in the future. Sometimes I've heard this expression of the energetic of anxiety being that we're in the future and that depression is that we're in the past. So are
Mm-hmm.
we too far ahead of ourselves? Or are we too far behind ourselves? Where's that middle ground or that middle place? Oh, here's a good one. Receiving will feel uncomfortable or like you
Yeah,
owe somebody for receiving. That one, oh, that one got me for a really long
me too.
time because a lot of women have been taught this transactional receiving. You only get to feel good if you've done the hard work, or you only get to um, say yes to the thing if you're also meaning, I have to say yes to this gift. That means that I need to. For a long time, ladies, this was one for me where I would go out for dinner and if they paid, I felt like I needed to kiss them or I felt like I needed to like have more like sexual connection
Mm-hmm.
based on them buying me dinner. Like just like that receptivity of like not needing to feel like you owe anybody for saying yes
Mm-hmm.
to being celebrated in life. So that whole idea of like needing to earn love or, which can show up from our childhood and it might be running the show subtly in some places and not so subtly in other places. But if you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you need to earn love, that's an adaptive strategy
Mm-hmm.
that came about probably from your big people, parents, like role models and leaders. There's all kinds of reasons we pick it up, but it means you've developed an adaptive strategy to keep you safe. And so they just need to go under renegotiation. They just need to be alchemized. I've got it.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. I see it. Do I want to keep choosing it? Because you can choose differently. Um, Consistently anticipating problems. Women are so good at this micromanaging of like, but if I don't do it all, it won't get done. That's a good one to ask yourself. Do you
Yeah.
believe that if I don't do all of the things on my list, that the whole world is going to shut down and come to a halt in some way, and that everything is going to go into pure chaos if it wasn't for all of the world relying on me? It's a really,
Mhm.
really like powerful adaptive strategy that most women have taken
Mhm.
on and then developed an identity of being like, well, I'm just so good at doing everything, right?
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
you tell me, but for a lot of women, that means that they resent men, they resent masculine, they resent other active agent women. It's because it gets depleted, right? We just start to feel like this deep depletion. Um,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
you're you rarely feel deeply seen. A
Mhm.
really great way of like understanding if you've got like an adaptive strategy or a sign that you're living from an adaptation is that you might get recognition for your career, for the way you look, for like some part of yourself, and it doesn't feel to you like it's you. They're recognizing you
Mhm.
based on something that you're portraying, but you
Mhm.
can't even see yourself within it. So it'll feel
Mhm.
really hollow. Those are like really great ones to look for. We all want to be deeply known. And we all want to be deeply known for like what's authentically true for us. But we've often been told that we can only be known for certain qualities. We call these good girl tendencies or good girl
Mhm.
conditioning. If you have a lot of good girl
Mhm.
conditioning, then the villain side of us, or the part of us that has big feelings, or the part of us that is going to say something controversial, she might be completely out of the picture altogether and might be coming in
Mhm.
like subversively or in a shadowy kind of way, right? So if we allow there to be this, again, this like nuance of like, there's the cultural good girl side of me, and there's this whole other side of me that has this wildness and this unpredictability, or this part that doesn't make sense. She's a part of the mystery. She doesn't make sense to the outer world. And if I've deemed her bad or wrong, then I'm the one that's repressing her. And again, it can
Mhm.
lead to this like, I don't really feel whole and like I'm enough. And I'm running around chasing the enoughness feeling in the outer world. So it's just that starts to become more familiar when we're doing this work over a period of time.
What practices actually help someone move from force into trust and or from proving into receiving?
Yeah. Yeah. You need to be able to know what your yeses and nos are. So, how do I move from that? I start testing. Do I want to say no to this, but I'm saying yes to
Mhm.
this? What would it be like if I held a boundary and said, no, not at this time?
Mhm.
I'm overcommitted. I can't make it. What
Mhm.
would it feel like to hold a boundary and then go through your process, which usually is the case, right? Oh my God, what are they going to think? Oh my God, are they going to hate me? I'm so selfish. How dare I do these things? Like whatever shows up will give you a little bit of where you are on that journey. So now you can, okay, I held a boundary. Step one, I listened to myself. I said no when I needed to say no. And then I'm going through all of the parts that now are getting kicked up from this, and I'm somatically listening to them and I'm being tender in meeting them. Oh,
Mhm.
yes, sweet younger part of me that like was afraid she was going to lose her friend, or sweet younger part of me that like really wants to stay in connection and is not sure who she is in the absence of connection. Like I'm
Mhm.
finding my way. I don't know what that is. I
Mhm.
really like people to know this part of the journey and transformation, which is when we don't have a neural network for something, the felt sense of that is confusion. So if we
Mhm.
have built a neural network around how to pick up a glass, and if we go to pick up the glass and we miss and we pick up like it will feel like the shame and confusion. Something in the neural network missed the information, or maybe it wasn't even there. So if you're feeling confusion, another way of looking at that is like, oh, good, I'm in transformation. I'm building a new neural
Mhm.
network, and the old network is going away. Yay! But instead, right, because of our like conditioning around our childhood education, we're like, oh no, I'm dumb or I'm stupid because I don't have an answer. And then there's these like micro self-abandonments that happen. So like noticing all your
Mhm.
micro self-abandonments that show up.
Mhm.
Noticing if your nervous system's like doing the fight, flight, fawn, freeze. Notice and see if you can, oh, I fawned. Oh, I fawned again. Oh, there was a flight reaction in the me where my son was trying to tie his shoes and he's getting really frustrated and he's learning it. And then because I'm uncomfortable with the pacing or the timing or the fact that he's this age and he hasn't gotten it and I have to help him, I go into flight and then I catch like, oh, I did that. I took away his
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to practice and to learn because I was uncomfortable with something. So really like so much of the beginning parts is just this awareness. And
Mm-hmm.
then if I am able to have the awareness of my nervous system and the directions that it's going, how can I resource myself? How can I come from a place of like a greater capacity? And like, well, this is like, I'll talk a little bit about Oracle Body. This is the journey of Oracle Body and this program that I have for women that is part of how Vilma Liz and I met was that like in the initial parts, it's like that masculine container of like, where am I overgiving? Where am I acting from good girl conditioning that doesn't feel true to me? And how can I choose myself instead? There's like a masculine part of us that needs to go, I don't have to say yes to that thing. I can say no. And I
Mm-hmm.
can, I really love, here's a great tool to work with for women in this one is can you take your complaints that you have and can you language them as desires instead? So can you say, if I'm complaining about how I don't have something, or there's an experience of like, I don't have this thing and I need this thing, and why isn't this thing here? And blah, 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 blah. That's one way of naming a
Yeah.
need.
Yeah.
Another one is I am deeply desiring the feeling of a hot bath right now and to be able to soften and to
Yeah.
sink into this. And that's my desire. And the pattern what we sometimes get conditioned is like, why isn't there a bath? I told you to run me a bath. Like this whole like
Mm-hmm.
focusing on where it isn't, as opposed to the feminine, which is like,
Mm-hmm.
here's what I want to experience that's delicious. Here's how I want to feel in my body that's delightful and all of these, aspects of like, here's what I want to offer the group because of my feminine embodiment. That priority will take us out of the masculinization and it'll start to show where those masculine tendencies can be replaced with these feminine resources. And so it's that trend from one direction to the other. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
masculine starts to recognize like where am I overdoing it? Where am I seeing myself abandoning? Where am I blaming it on the outer world? Can I feel what needs to be felt? Can I feel the desire? I swear this is like such a tender part of the work I do with women is like when you start asking them to speak to their desires, they're like terrified. Like it's so scary. I can't name that. Like what would that make me? Because we tend to do that, right? We
Yeah.
merge a desire with like who we are. It's not who we are. But that's the feminine, like that's phase two of like, well, now that you've got the masculine capacity to see the landscape, to choose embodiment instead of choose reactive repression or fight, flight, freeze. It's like, no, I've taken care of my nervous system. Now here's the desire because as soon as you're not in fear all the time, your desires will show up. And that's good news. Ooh, I'm going to crave
Mm-hmm.
this. Ooh, I want
Yeah.
to feel this. I want to
Yes.
taste this. I want to experience this. That's the feminine side. So the next layer of
Yeah.
healing is around, yes, girl, you're allowed to feel
Yeah.
that. And then like to even spend more time with like, what is the deeper layer of that desire? So
Mm-hmm.
those two parts then go into integration in phase three, which is like I'm agile. I'm not all masculine or all feminine. I'm both. I can apply
Mm-hmm.
each of them based on my own capacity and flexibility of like what does this moment need? And if
Mm-hmm.
it's not needing my masculine, all right, then I go
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
nourishing part of my feminine.
Yes.
That is such a big journey to get to know that like,
Yes.
a nervous system is meant to deal with the fear, deal with the thing, deal with whatever it is, and then go into like laying about and watching the savannah and like, sipping on a something. And just like it's like a really
Yeah.
glorious way of living life where we act and then we surrender, and then we act and then we surrender. And then, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's really I love this part of my life for this reason. I pulled up a quote that I wanted to include because I feel like for the women that are on the more mature phase of their cycle, like I'm coming into perimenopause at 47, and so many women have this when they're in their like early 40s. But I heard this quote I just thought it was such a great like perimenopause is the biological exorcism of the fawn response. Because if you think about perimenopause, or you think of like women that have the sensitivity, these symptoms that are showing, it's like
Yeah.
fire. It's like I'm burning off
Mm,
all of the times that estrogen
mm,
has taken my word and like made me quiet, or all of the times where I
mm,
felt like I was conditioned through my chemistry of estrogen, but also through my cultural environment. A woman has to be this way, a woman has to be this way, a woman has to show up for other, like
mm,
all of those things. They start to kind of, they become more clearly seen by my masculine. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not
mm-hmm,
doing, you do that. Like it stops being this abandonment, this exorcism,
mm-hmm.
this fawn response. So knowing the responses is okay. Like it helps, it helps so much to be like, I fawned in the past and I'm not now. And
Yes,
then sometimes people are like, who are you? Because you're just not falling into the avoidant pattern or the fawn response. So like that's a big initiation that we are
for
all
sure.
going through at various times when we come to
Yeah,
find our autonomy, which is changing, that the people that were dependent on the way we used to give our power away, they're not going to be thrilled about us holding on to it. Not because
sure.
we're bad, they're bad, but because they're just not used to it. Their system's used to getting what they want. So they're going to be like, wait,
Yes.
what?
Yeah, something does happen that's really beautiful as we begin to mature. I mean, I'm 40, so I'm not there entirely, but I'm probably starting to step into perimenopause soon. I don't know, but it it really permissions you, or just I don't know if it's permission, but more you're just done with it.
Yeah.
You're done with that phase where you're
Yeah.
doing it for everyone else. And as we begin this work as well, we learned how to do it in such a um, fluid way and honor still what's there, but it just changes how we do it versus when we don't have this information, if you will. If when we have this understanding of the healthy feminine and the healthy masculine, when we learn to connect with our bodies through somatics and develop those interoception skills, we really are able to let that part of us come up and stay in a healthy place. When you are coming out of that um, slumber, if you will, it can it can become really destructive, and I believe it has for a lot of women. And you just sort of like now finding yourself later in life, what the fuck, how have I not known this before? And it can bring up a lot of anger, I believe, and from what I've heard other women express. And so it just lets you do it in a beautiful, graceful way where you're meeting yourself and all those parts that are experiencing all those things, because those things are perfectly natural, but do it in a very like grounded, in a very do it from a grounded place. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. There's these great phases that are apart. I like to tell men when I work with men is like, you're not married to one woman, you're married to four, but also that there's like these chapters in her life that are going to change every
Mm,
25-ish years or every 20 years. And I've, talked to men that have been married for a really long time. They'll say like, I have many wives. I've had many lives with this one woman because we do transform so much. And I agree. Like like if you're in your 30s and you're listening to this, or if you're in your 20s and you're listening to this and you're feeling like, oh, I'm not able to like practice those things, I would just encourage you to like,
mm,
you'll develop the tone. It took us a
yeah.
little while too. And if you're, a lot of the time for years, I ran yoga retreats where primarily the demographic was women that their children had left. They were empty nesters. The children were leaving the house. They didn't really know who they were, or they didn't know if they were still in love with their husband or wanted their life anymore because they had been in this devotional relationship with their family for so long that they had successfully avoided coming to know who they were now. And they'd come to these like retreats and then just be like,
Mm,
even know who I am anymore. I don't even know
mm,
what I want. I just know that I'm tired and I don't want what I have at home. And so now I'm going on this journey of discovering. And so if you're
mm,
numb and you're in your latter 40s and you're in your early 50s or even sort of beyond that, like it's okay. You can start at any time. It's wild what happens when women start to pick it up in their 50s. Like they move through it so fast, right? Because
yeah, because they've been ready.
yeah, they're ready.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
They're ready. So like
absolutely.
I want to live in a world where women are playful and the crone is celebrated, the embodied maga is celebrated. We live in this strange world where the masculine is celebrated or the muse and the young woman, and that's it. And then there's not this space for like these unbelievable, powerful expressions of women. I believe
Yeah.
that's changing. But
Thank
like,
God.
look for the women that we admire that are these like, I love the word maga, this like big energy expression that
Mm,
are holding that prowess quietly and walking it in the world.
mm.
And maybe not so quietly at times, but the fierceness of the roar doesn't have to do with how loud it is.
Yes, exactly. Oh, I love that. Beautiful way to close that. Sarah, how can someone work with you if they were interested in learning more about how to step a little bit more fully into the healthy version of the masculine and the feminine?
Yeah. I'll paint a bit of a picture of what that looks like. I love working off of people's gene keys. I like to start with their gene keys because each of us has like a very unique map for us. I'm not going to apply any system to you. I'm going to use that map to be like, tell me more about this. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about these like elements because I have found that the gene key system really gives me like where I used to do an assessment with you on your body, and I'd have you stand up and I'd look at where you were lined up and where you were not lined up, and we'd work on your body based on like, oh, your shoulder's a little bit like this, or your hip is a little bit like that. And then that would be the way that I would assess where you're at, and we'd set up an intention together. Now that I work with the nervous system and these like mystical feminine parts, the mystical map of your birth chart really gives us this great place for the soul to speak. You know,
Mm,
if you're not feeling your purpose, it might just be that your purpose is actually already here and nobody's taught you it's this and it speaks like this and it has this essence and you are doing it. You just hadn't realized it. So I start with people's gene keys and then depending on their level of commitment and really like where do they want to go within a period of time, it takes a minimum 3 months, I find, to really start to practice these skills of like the masculine discipline, the feminine embodiment, the agile integration of it in my life takes about 3 months. For some women, they
yeah.
prefer to do it over 6 months, and it depends on your needs and how much time you want to spend working with me. But my greatest experience of myself is to be working as a mentor with women, and I just adore the opportunity to help women claim these parts that are blocked behind rejection or blocked behind shame or blocked behind these like, teachings of how to be a
Mm,
good girl or how to not be a bad girl or, whatever it is. So it depends on their needs, but I would say just reach out to me through my website or, some way through Instagram
yes.
and send me a message. And then we'll do a bit of a little assessment to figure out where do you want to go? What is your
Yeah.
priority? What do you want to experience? Where are you at? And every single woman I've worked with is at a different place. Every
Yes.
single one is at a different place. Like there's
Yeah.
no time to start or not start. It's, it all has to do with
Yeah.
our willingness to experience transformation as like a birthright and to experience pleasure as a birthright. And that's an awesome place to start to
Mhm.
change your life. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you're a wonderful guide. So anyone that works with you, it's very lucky, including myself.
Well, thank you. Thank you
Thank you.
so
Thank you,
much.
Sarah. Thank you for being here. And thank you so, so much for just sharing all your wonderful wisdom with all of us. It's been such a gift. And I look forward to so many more of these with you.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me.